Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. We've got a really interesting one today.
We really do.
Mm.
So, okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at some excerpts from this fascinating article. It's called Defining Independence in DPDPA Audit Scoping.
Right, which sounds incredibly technical, I know.
It does. It sounds like absolute corporate jargon. But our mission for this deep dive is to show you the hidden high-stakes tug-of-war that is actually happening behind the scenes of corporate data privacy.
Exactly, because this is really about who actually gets to decide the rules when a company's data practices are audited.
Right. We tend to view corporate audits through this lens of absolute objectivity. You picture this impartial auditor coming in.
With a clipboard and a magnifying glass.
Yes, running a fine-tooth comb over every single server and database, and then delivering a definitive pass or fail.
But, I mean, the reality in data privacy, especially under the new Digital Personal Data Protection Act, or DPDP, is that this objective reality is kind of an illusion.
It really is. The source material points out this crazy tension between the Chief Information Security Officer, the CISO, and the Data Protection Officer, the DPO.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that this isn't just bureaucratic red tape. It's a fundamental conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's about the independence of these audits, because the CISO's mandate is largely financial and operational, right?
Exactly. They have to protect enterprise assets, keep the systems running, manage the cyber budget.
So if securing a 10-year-old legacy database costs more than the anticipated fallout of a data breach, the CISO might just rationally choose to accept that risk.
Right. They might just scope it entirely out of the audit.
Wow, but then you have the DPO sitting across the table, and their mandate is totally different.
Exactly. The DPO is there to protect the data principal, meaning you. The actual human being whose personal information is sitting in that vulnerable database.
Which naturally brings us to how these audits are traditionally run, the status quo, so to speak.
Yeah, if you look at most legacy governance frameworks, they give management all the power to define the scope of compliance activities.
Right, like ISO 27001. That one relies heavily on this mechanism called the Statement of Applicability.
Right, so management just looks at a massive list of security controls, and they simply declare which ones apply to their environment and which ones, don't.
Which is wild. It's basically political gerrymandering, but for corporate data. You just redraw the district lines to exclude the messy databases that would guarantee a failed inspection.
That is a perfect way to describe it. If they decide a specific business unit is outside that boundary, they just don't include it in the statement of applicability.
And the auditor's job is simply to verify that the controls management said they implemented are actually functioning.
Right. The auditor is essentially just checking the math on a test where management wrote the questions.
Which, historically, I guess that made sense.
It did. Because in traditional information security, the business owns the risk.
Right. If a company decides not to put an expensive firewall around a server holding their own proprietary algorithm, and it gets stolen, the shareholders take the financial hit.
Exactly. Management bears the business risk, so they get to determine their own risk appetite.
It's like owning a house. If you want to leave your back door completely unlocked because, you have a big dog and really good insurance, that's your choice. You own the risk.
Right. You can consciously accept those risks and handle them via operational controls or just, an insurance payout.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the DPDPA changes that dynamic entirely.
It completely upends it.
Yeah.
Because a DPDPA audit isn't a conventional information security audit anymore.
Right. The risk being evaluated is no longer just business risk. It's harm to the data principal.
Exactly. The core question an auditor must answer shifts. It's no longer, has the organization managed its risk?
But crucially, have the interests of the data principals been reasonably protected?
Right, because if management scopes out a vulnerable environment and relies on their cyber insurance policy, that insurance payout goes to the company.
Exactly. It does absolutely nothing for the millions of consumers, for you whose identities were just compromised on the dark web.
Yeah. An excessively narrow audit scope allows management to hide significant privacy risks while legally looking perfectly acceptable on paper.
Which is terrifying. So because a narrow audit scope can mask all these dangers to the consumer, let's talk about how current frameworks are trying to fix this massive loophole.
Right. And this is where we see frameworks like the DGPSI stepping in to change the game.
Yeah, the DGPSI framework completely shifts away from that old model. They introduce this structured risk assessment phase.
Exactly. Instead of passively accepting a statement of applicability from management, The auditor identifies the risks based on specific implementation specifications.
Right. They map out the inherent risks across the entire data lifecycle, from collection to deletion, and then they present those risks to management.
And at that point, management has to make a choice. They can mitigate the risk, transfer it, absorb it, or manage it.
But, and this is the key part, under DGPSI, if they choose to exclude a system or accept a glaring vulnerability, they must execute a deviation justification document.
Right. They can't just silently omit it anymore. They have to document and justify any exclusions.
I love the analogy the source material uses for this. It compares it to managing health risks.
Oh, yeah, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Like, if an individual has severe hypertension, you don't eliminate the risk of a heart attack entirely.
Right. The doctor doesn't just pretend the condition doesn't exist if the patient refuses surgery.
Exactly. You consciously manage it through a mix of, daily medication, lifestyle adjustments, keeping emergency facilities on speed dial.
And insurance. But the point is, the risk is documented. You are consciously managing the residual risk.
Right. And the deviation justification document serves that exact same purpose for corporate data infrastructure.
Which brings us to the really innovative part of DGPSI, the Data Trust Score, or DTS.
Yes. The data trust score. This concept is fascinating. How exactly does this score work?
Well, it's crucial because it reflects not just the security controls a company has implemented, but also those residual risks that management simply chose to accept.
Okay, wait. So if the data trust score includes risks they just accepted, does that mean a company could technically get a passing grade while actively choosing to ignore a glaring privacy loophole?
That is the exact concern. And the genius of the data trust score is that it mathematically penalizes that accepted risk.
Oh, okay. So it's not just a traditional pass-fail metric.
Not at all. Let's say an organization implements state-of-the-art encryption for 80% of their environment. They score very high on those metrics.
Right.
But if their deviation justification document reveals they are knowingly leaving the remaining 20% completely unpatched.
Like a legacy customer support portal or something?
Exactly. The DTS algorithm applies a heavy negative weight to that residual risk.
Wow. So they could invest millions in their primary infrastructure, but still end up with an abysmal data trust score.
Right, because they tried to sweep one highly sensitive, vulnerable database under the rug. The score aggregates the entire risk posture.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. But this pushback perfectly sets up the exact concern raised in the source text regarding corporate loopholes.
Yeah, because we are seeing this dangerous trend during industry discussions. Management is adopting what they call a wait-and-see strategy.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really frustrating.
Right. The C-suites are aggressively shrinking the audit scope, accepting the lower data trust score, and internally justifying it.
By saying, we will deal with the risk if and when it materializes.
Exactly. It's a massive gamble. They are betting that the cost of an eventual data breach will be lower than the immediate capital expenditure required to upgrade their systems today.
Which is just wild when you think about it in real-world terms. I mean, if a company waits for a data breach to materialize before dealing with it, it's your personal data that gets leaked.
Exactly. It's the listener's data.
The company saves money on infrastructure this quarter, while you spend the next 3 years trying to freeze your credit and reclaim your identity.
Right. Which poses the critical question from the text. If management's decisions significantly affect the data principles, shouldn't there be an independent validation mechanism?
Yeah. Management shouldn't be the only ones grading their own homework. It's a huge conflict of interest.
It fundamentally is.
Mm-hmm.
And acknowledging that danger leads directly into the industry's proposed safety net.
Right, the Audit Quality Control Committee. This is the proposed solution detailed in the source.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting approach.
So the suggestion is that audit scopes should be supported by a formal risk assessment and then reviewed by an independent body before the audit even proceeds.
Right. But this raises an important question, right? Is this independent body going to micromanage the company's IT budget?
Exactly. Because businesses still have to function.
Right. So to clarify, the goal is not to overrule management or dictate their implementation choices.
Okay. So they aren't saying you must buy this specific firewall vendor.
Not at all. The sole objective of this committee is to determine if the scoping assumptions are professionally reasonable.
Professionally reasonable. Okay. And the DGPSI framework actually envisions this as a voluntary validation process, right?
Yes. The auditor voluntarily submits their risk assessment and the proposed scoping document to an FDPPI quality committee.
FDPPI being the Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India.
Exactly. It would be a peer review committee of veteran privacy professionals.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here again.
Go for it.
If this submission is voluntary and the committee can't actually certify compliance or legally block the audit from proceeding, isn't this just a toothless suggestion box?
It absolutely sounds like one at first glance. Why would a company voluntarily submit to a review if they know they're gerrymandering their scope?
Exactly. If I know I'm hiding something, I'm not going to voluntarily show my map to a committee just to get told I'm being unreasonable.
Right. But the true power here lies in examining whether significant exclusions have been adequately justified, because it creates a discoverable paper trail.
Ah, legal liability.
Exactly. In corporate governance, willful negligence is punished far more severely than an unforeseen technical failure.
Right, so if they submit it and the committee flags a major exclusion as unreasonable, the company can still proceed.
The committee won't stop them, but that warning is permanently documented.
Oh, wow. So if that exact accepted risk materializes 6 months later and a massive breach happens,
The regulatory investigation will subpoena those audit trails.
and they'll see that an independent committee explicitly warned management.
Exactly. And management ignored it to save money. The legal narrative shifts instantly. It becomes a documented case of willful negligence.
That is a massive liability tripwire. It creates actual accountability without interfering with auditor independence.
Right. And conversely, if a company refuses to participate in this voluntary review process entirely, that absence of a paper trail becomes its own red flag.
Oh, that makes sense. Regulators would just ask, why didn't you put your audit scope through the standard independent validation?
Exactly. It makes the company look incredibly suspicious.
So bringing this deep dive to a close, it really is this delicate balancing act.
It is. Management must absolutely retain the right to determine business priorities and allocate budgets.
Right. But DPDPA compliance demands that we recognize human interests that extend far beyond the corporate walls.
Exactly. The decisions a CISO makes directly impact the privacy of the broader public.
And it's great to see that organizations like FDPPI and the Association of Independent Data Auditors of India, AADI, are currently developing these ethical and professional standards.
Right. They are building a credible ecosystem from the ground up.
Which is so necessary. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on this whole theme of protecting the data principle.
Yeah, this is something I find really provocative. If these audits are ultimately designed to protect your interests as a data principal, and not just the company's bottom line, should the final audit scopes and data trust scores eventually become public knowledge?
Oh, wow, like full transparency.
Exactly. When you hand over your data to a new app or service, shouldn't you have the right to see exactly what parts of their system management chose not to audit?
That would completely change the power dynamic. Imagine seeing their deviation justification documents right next to the user agreement.
Right. You'd be able to see the residual risks they chose to accept on your behalf.
I feel like if you knew an application was purposefully excluding its primary servers from security audits, you probably wouldn't use it.
Exactly.
We are definitely a long way from that level of public transparency. But this battle over audit scoping is clearly the necessary first step.
It absolutely is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the fine print, keep an eye on where those invisible fences are being drawn, and we will see you next time.